Welcome, everyone. The webinar will begin shortly and will be recorded. We invite for you to connect with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR. On Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. And on LinkedIn, subscribe to us at Campaign for GLR. Please use hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learned from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Okay, once again, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I'll be behind the scenes helping to produce this conversation. I have just a few housekeeping details before we get started. First, we'd love for you to introduce yourself, so please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage you to post any questions you might have in the Q&A box, as we'll be dedicating some time both during and at the end of the session to respond to those questions. This webinar is being recorded and live streamed on Facebook Live. A recording, as well as any resources and slides that you see shared, will be sent to you in a follow-up email. And finally, we'll have a brief evaluation poll right towards the end of closing and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. And finally, before we begin, I'd like to call your attention to our upcoming webinars. Later today at 3 p.m. Eastern, we have a special rebroadcast on our YouTube channel on Big Bets Part 3, Community Schools Accelerating Equitable Recovery. The link to that YouTube channel will be posted in the chat box now. And in the following weeks, we'll have some special sessions. Our first co-sponsored by New America on January 17th. On January 24th, we'll have a session on Closing the Gap, co-sponsored by Attendance Works. And on January 31st, we'll wrap up the month with a session co-sponsored by the Patterson Foundation on digital access and devices. Registration and more information will be posted in the chat box now, and we hope you can join us. Joining you now is Malaya Amfar, Senior Consultant with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you so much, Sierra. Good morning to everybody. Good afternoon from wherever you might be. Happy New Year. I'm excited today to and grateful to start 2023 and today's Crucible of Practice series featuring a tremendous community in our network, which is 313 Reads from Detroit, Michigan. Before we do that, we do have a poll that I would invite Sierra to launch to give us a sense of who is in the room. So if you would feel free to respond to the poll question once we have that up, that would be really tremendous. It will help our speakers today to know who is in the room and where you may be coming from in terms of your participation. And while that poll is up, I'm going to do just a quick introduction of our topic today. The conversation will explore how 313 Reads approaches collective learning, particularly through a model called Communities of Practice. The convergence of coalitions is really powerful, and for this community, it means a much bigger impact in supporting children and families with education outcomes. This team truly exemplifies words of Helen Keller with this quote, "Alone we can do so little, and together we can do so much." Our amazing team today includes Leah Van Bell, Executive Director with 313 Reads, Christine Bell, Executive Director and co-chair of the coalition Every School Day Counts Detroit, alongside Reverend Larry Simmons Sr., Executive Director of Brightmoor Alliance and co-chair with Christine of Every School Day Counts Detroit, Emma Hardeen, Senior Fellow with Attendance Works, Andrea Meyer, who is the Executive Director of Center for Success. Soon, I will be placing the biography sheet in the chat and encourage you to check it out and all of their amazing collective accomplishments. And so with this, I'm happy to introduce our moderator today from 313 Reads. Elise Hartman is she is the director, of Collective Resources and Learning with the 313 Reads team. She is a passionate urban educator, speaker, writer, and curriculum developer with a background in literacy. Elise has 11 years of experience teaching in the public school system, leading youth-based programs for nonprofit organizations, and working in social service settings for community development companies. She also tells me that she has a bookmobile that she shepherds and distributes free books and reading materials to children throughout the community in Detroit. She's an incredible facilitator. We're so grateful and lucky to have her today, and it's a joy to hand things off to her. Elise, take it away.
Thank you, Malai. Thank you for such a beautiful introduction. Yes, my name is Elise Hartman, and I am the Director of Collective Learning and Resources at 313 Reads. And I'm excited to be here today and eager to listen as the team shares a bit about the work with 313 Reads and the organizations that they represent within the coalition. Leah, the Executive Director of 313 Reads, does such a great job of putting all of the pieces to the puzzle together. I am going to ask her to share a bit about the work of 313 Reads, the history of the organization, and what collective learning means to 313 Reads. Leah, let's not delay. Can you go ahead and kick us off and share a bit about our work?
Yeah, thanks, Malai. So grateful to be here today. We are, as folks have mentioned, 313 Reads in Detroit. And please connect with us on socials. We look forward to connecting with you. I want to say personally, I've been with the coalition for about 2.5 years. Before that, I was a classroom teacher, a university professor. I worked at the state level around teacher equity and diversity. And so coming into Collective Impact was new to me. And I am so grateful for everyone in CGLR for all that I've learned about approaching this kind of collective work, and really grateful for all of the chapters that we've been able to connect with and learn from. So grateful to connect with you again here today. And if we can go to the next slide. Thanks. So these are some of our partners. Our coalition launched sort of a soft launch in 2017. And we then sort of formally launched in 2018 with 2 co-backbones, who you see their logos up at the top left of the screen there. Those are Brilliant Detroit and United Way for Southeastern Michigan. Incredibly grateful for their support and helping us build this coalition. We have grown from a very small coalition to having over 74 partners and more than 56 signed agreements and data sharing agreements. So we're really tremendously excited about that growth. And our partners include, as you can see here, nonprofits, funders. They include literacy programs, Detroit Public Schools. But one thing that's interesting to know about Detroit is that some CGLRs, like Pontiac Reads is another amazing CGLR in Michigan. They work primarily with Pontiac community schools, public schools. I may be getting the name wrong. Andrea can correct us because she was a part of building that. But they work with one district primarily. In Detroit, we have more than 45 districts, including DPSCD, because we're right up there with New Orleans in the number of public charters. So that adds a lot of complexity to it, opportunity and complexity. So those are some of our partners. We wanted to just share that with you. Next slide, please. Thank you. And the work of this community practice that we're going to talk about today, again, grateful for the support of our co-backbones, was also funded by the Skillman Foundation, Every School Day Counts Detroit. And we've also received funding from Skillman and the Fisher Foundation to bring in consultants to help us grow collective muscle at the systems level on collective impact. So that's another exciting journey for us. We want to continue to learn and grow together, and doing that better at a systems level. So those are some of our funders and supporters for this. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is an interesting map. This is Detroit, an odd little shaped community, but we are about 143 square miles. So we're really big geographically. And this map shows literacy inequity. So Michigan, some new data were just released today by the Ed Trust Midwest, new report. We are now 43rd nationally in reading scores for 4th graders. So post-COVID, we've actually dropped lower in the national rankings. About 47% of adults in Detroit are functionally illiterate. And our child poverty rates are 3 times the national average. and about 41% overall for poverty. I share those to say, Detroit is an amazing place. I live in Detroit. My son goes to, public school in Detroit, as do others, little humans on this call. But we're resilient, we're amazing. We have a lot of community resources. And also we're a community, like many of you joining us, that has been marginalized to the point of poverty. And so there is a significant grapple here to address this. And when we look at this map, we can see that, overall, our state average is about 44% third grade reading proficiency on the M-STEP, which is our state test for literacy. DPSED, which is Detroit Public Schools, about 12% of their students are proficient. And that sounds bad, but it's even worse when you look, and these are zip codes in Detroit. So if you can look, and there's sort of like a light lavender zip code in the middle, that's 26.53%. And that's the third grade reading proficiency there. If you go a mile to the left, it drops to 3.61. And the reason that we're sharing these data, as Malai pointed out, is because the need is so significant. As a former classroom teacher, and others in our coalition are former teachers, we respect schools very much. We're working in deep partnership with them. And also, it's going to take a community. So this is important for us to see. This is the reality of where we're at, and this is why we're mobilizing. This also has shaped our coalition, and that previously, I remember when I joined, all the language was around, we have to get kids to grade level, as if there was something wrong with our babies and we've got to get them there. And what we've really named really strongly together over the last couple of years is there's nothing wrong with our babies. There are systems of inequity, systems of oppression, marginalization, lack of access to resources, including lack of access to resources for those who are serving them, that we want to address. And that's what we're about. So we really have reframed as a coalition how we think about what it means to support grade level reading. And we don't talk about grade level reading without talking about equity and justice. Next slide. Thanks. And that's, I think we lost the deck maybe. So that actually has informed our mission statement. So our mission statement used to be that our goal was to get all kids to third grade reading with an increase of 3% annually. And we relied really heavily on assessment. In fact, in some ways, it felt like that was the core of what we did as a coalition, was mobilize a common assessment. But, we can keep measuring children and measuring them. But until we do things differently, it doesn't change where they're at, right? And so we've shifted to say that we work as this coalition to make sure that those who serve children, so those literacy champions, whether they're school-based, community-based, faith-based, or in the family, that they have access to what they need to support literacy. And we've also expanded that to include looking at family and adult literacy, because we've really come to name that we can't have the impact that we want to have on little humans literacy without also supporting family and adult literacy. So, and that's actually new for us, this shift, and it's pretty significant. And we've been really excited to learn from other coalitions, other CGLRs, about how you're framing your mission and what your key levers are. And that has directly informed us. So again, we love learning from and with one another. And if we could go to the next slide. Thank you. Our key levers have shifted a little bit too. Instead of, the assessment being, the prime thing that we do, we've named that what we really are is co-conspirators for equity and justice, to use co-conspirators as a term coined by Dr. Bettina Love. That the reason we do this is we want to get to literacy as access and opportunity, literacy as equity and justice, and literacy as liberation. In fact, that series of statements is now at the top of our website, right? Like, this is what this is really about. And collective learning is a prime key lever for us now, and it wasn't before. Originally, the stance was sort of, well, we don't do professional development. That's not what we do. But as we continue to work together and grow together and build together, we collectively realized, actually, we do want to learn from one another. And there are partners doing amazing work that we can learn from one another and amplify that. So collective learning now is something that cuts across all areas of our work. Elise, as she mentions, champions that work, but it's incredibly important. And this community of practice that we're talking about today is one example of how we're approaching collective learning. Another one of our key levers is evidence-based and culturally sustaining practices. So we have partners who have been serving families for generations, are doing deeply important work that we respect tremendously. And they want to support literacy, and that's amazing. And we want to say, do you have the tools that you need to do that? How can we help? And part of that is building the trust and the rapport to collectively look and see, are the programs going to have the impact? Are they aligned with evidence-based practices, with science of reading? So really building from a place of trust. And we're really working on that, right? Because it's really hard to both value the deep work that someone is doing and also say, hey, maybe let's make some pivots together in this. So we're still kind of puzzling through that. And we see collective learning as critical to that. Our mobilization of our common assessment has pivoted significantly. Amber is on this call. Amber Gustafson is leading our data evaluation work. And we've really said, this is not just about measuring our babies who have for far too long been measured as coming up lacking, but about how do we use those data for equity. So when we look at that map that we just saw, and we see these grossly disparate literacy rates across Detroit, what do we do with that, right? How does that inform continuous improvement and programming and systems level change? And then another key lever for us now is collective funding. We've heard very much from our program partners, particularly, that is a significant value add for them. And so we've added that to our key levers. Next slide. And so, and this is my last slide as a heads up to my person who follows me. Collective learning, as I said, we've really shifted significantly in this and see it as the heart of what we do. And we're all learners, we're all teachers. We take that very sincerely. So we want to amplify the good work that the partners are doing. And we also want to think about how we can build out more systemic, aligned, coordinated efforts, also with what's happening at the state. So we started with community conversations and webinars that were pretty low lifts for us. And what we did to sort of get our feet wet, see if this was a fit, see what this felt like, was we would see a convening that was happening that we thought this would be of a lot of interest for our partners. Could we amplify this, invite them to this, and then have a community conversation following it? So for instance, the Coalition of Schools Educating Boys of Color, COSBOC, amazing organization. When they had their annual conference in Detroit, I was on the planning committee for that, deep respect for them. They were having a webinar about literacy and literacy equity and culturally sustaining literacy. Like perfect, like this is a perfect thing to amplify to our partners. So I reached out to Ron, CEO, and said, would you mind if we piggybacked and had a Detroit community conversation adjacent to that? They were excited about it. We were excited about it. So it was inviting our partners to join this larger national conversation, and then for us to make space to sort of unpack it together and say, okay, but what does this mean for us? What does this mean for Detroit? And that was a nice way to sort of get started and see, is this helpful to people? Do people find this a value add? And from there it grew. We then had a 5-part dyslexia series. Amber helped us launch that, and Elise champions that now. And really that was a way to bring together national partners to say, what can we learn about not just screening for dyslexia and how to support readers with dyslexia, but how can we approach this through equity lenses? And that was all good, but we realized we wanted deeper learning and more sustained learning. So we wanted to build a community of practice. And this community of practice for attendance to support literacy is the first community of practice that we've launched. We're in our 2nd year. We have learned so much from it. And it's already informing another community of practice that we're building around literacy essentials for equity. And so, it's the perfect sort of growth for us, going much more deeper. And this community of practice and the one for literacy essentials, these are central to our 3-year strategic plan. So it's really exciting to see how in the span of about 2 years, we went from, we don't do professional learning, like that's not what we do, to hey, we all have things we can teach. We all have things we can learn. Yeah, let's do it together to make sure that everyone has the tools they need. And as the classroom teacher in me, I would always say that my students as readers and writers had little tool belts. And when you taught them new skills, they had little tools in their tool belts to use. And in the same way, we want to make sure that all the literacy champions in our community have the tools they need in their tool belts. And so this kind of collective learning, these kinds of community of practice are just such a rich opportunity for that. We sit at the table and are a member of the core leadership team of Every School Day Counts Detroit, and are really excited to be here today to talk about this community practice with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. You did such a great job setting the stage. And we've got Christine and Rev here with us as well. Christine and Rev, you're both here representing your organizations, UNI and Brightmoor Alliance, and you're the co-chairs of Every School Day Counts Detroit. Can you share a bit about the history of Every School Day Counts Detroit, and a little bit about your background with UNI and Brightmoor Alliance, and tell us what the catalyst for Every School Day Counts Detroit was, and how has the pandemic influenced your work here in Detroit?
Christine, you want to kick us off?
Yep, I will. So I'm Christine, and I am the executive director of Urban Neighborhood Initiatives. And Every School Day Counts, I didn't realize how big of a mouthful it was until we've heard it over and over again today. But it really started for both organizations with community. And so our organization was creating a quality of life plan. We engaged over 500 residents, young people, providers, school teachers, school administrators. And one of the things that came out of that community engagement was that kids aren't going to school. They didn't identify chronic absenteeism because no one was really talking about it in 2011 and 2012, maybe except for Attendance Works. Nobody was really talking about chronic absenteeism, but people saw that kids were not in school. And so I started down a path of trying to think through how do we increase attendance. And it also felt like something that our organization could do. You know, we couldn't go into classrooms and tell teachers how to teach. But we could say, as a community, how do we ensure that our young people are, academically successful? And that really starts with just showing up. I think the other thing for us that was critical is we have, as an organization, a really large workforce development program for young people. And so what we saw was that young people that were struggling to go to school were also struggling to go to work and show up every day, even though there was an incentive being paid, so on and so forth. So with that, I was responsible for developing this strategy. And in Southwest Detroit, which is a predominantly a community made up predominantly of people that identify as Latina and Latino, we had DHHS come into the schools. At the time, a partner organization had just put community school coordinators in a number of our schools, all of which were supposed to help with attendance. And so we really worked on coordinating. But at the same time, and I'll segue to Larry to talk about Brightmoor's history, at the same time, Larry and I had just been part of founding an organization, an organizing network called 482 Forward. So Larry and I had started to build a really trusting relationship. And little did I know that at the same time, while I was trying to figure out how do we build this attendance strategy, Brightmoor and Rev's group, the Brightmoor Alliance, was noodling over the same issue. So I'll I'll pass it to Rev to talk a little bit about Brightmoor's history.
So let me say at the beginning that I'm hoping that my conversation with you today will change your eye level. I am a former athlete, played college football and high school football, and coached basketball for 10 years in the city. And one of the things you learn in athletics is when you are up against an opponent, you want to change their eye level, get them to look in a different place. And what we're hoping at Every School Day Counts Detroit today is to change your eye level, to look at the same problem, but to see it differently, which is what every inventor does. If you think about invention, everybody who invents something looks at exactly the same thing everybody else has been looking at, but they see something different. So back in 2012, which is hard to believe, that's now a long time ago, we were trying to understand how to help our children, and the community identified that our children were not in school. They were being seen walking the streets during times they should be in school. We called this absenteeism at the time. But little did we know our eye level was about to change, because as we began to learn together, we discovered that in Southwest, they were wrestling with the same issue. And so we joined forces, and from our community research and learning, we discovered Balfance at St. John's, Johns Hopkins, excuse me. We discovered Hetty Chang at Attendance Works, and our language began to change, which shifted our eye level. So instead of looking at the whole classroom and a thing called average daily attendance, our eye level shifted to the individual student operating in a set. And we began to look at how often are students present in school, which takes us to the idea of chronic absence. If you can go to the next slide. And so as we began to reach out and travel, you just saw the slide of us traveling up to Grand Rapids together. We began to learn and to shift our eye level and understood that chronic absence is closely associated with less likelihood to read at grade level. It's closely associated with not being likely not to graduate high school on time. More likely or less likely to stay out of trouble if you're chronically absent, less likely to succeed after high school. You heard Christine mention that chronic absence in school is absenteeism in the workplace. So our work led us to a new eye level, which I want to, if I can shift you to, and I'm going to send this back to Christine, and we can go to the next slide. As we think about changing eye level, I want you to think about changing the way you may think about these problems, because you can start with health. It's going to lead you back to this issue of poverty and its effects. You can start with school attendance or chronic absence, 56% in Detroit, which means nearly 6 out of every 10 students is absent more than 10% of the time. It's going to lead you back to poverty. You can start with likelihood of developing a case. Well, let me rephrase that, because everybody may not know what I mean by that. Of getting in trouble with the law. Everybody know what catching a case means? Anyway,
if you had said that, I would have known. Developing a case. Okay.
Right.
Go ahead.
Catching a case. So, so the point here is there is some work that's been done by this, and the group taught me this, Brofenbrenner. You want to take that, Christine?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things here that are important to lift up. We knew that, I mean, I think in your gut, you know, there's sort of these systems issues that are going on. And so when I think Rev is talking about raising your eye level, when we talk about attendance, you hear a lot, well, parents just don't care and kids don't care. And our rates of chronic absenteeism actually says that this is a systems issue. And so Braun and Breffer, was a great model for us to look at, because it allowed us to look at the individual and then how the different systems impact the individual's decisions and their ability, the student's ability to engage. And what we know is that it is not that parents and kids don't care. In fact, the research that Wayne State has been doing with us, they're part of our core team, and they just changed the center's name to
Detroit Partnership for Education, Equity, and Research.
Yes.
The peer.
Yeah, peer. So they have been doing research alongside all of our intervention strategies. And what they have found sort of in that research is that parents really deeply care whether or not their children are successful in school. And like Larry said, in a city like Detroit, where you have the levels of poverty that we do, that have all these outcomes that negatively impact our residents, one of those things is chronic absenteeism. So what we have found is really it's a proxy for the other issues, systems issues that exist in the city. So we if Brown and Bradford is to your left, or it's to my left on the screen, and our ecological model is to your right. And so we have in our work 4 pillars that we believe if all of those pillars are working at a school and functioning, that we can increase attendance, decrease chronic absenteeism. And each of those pillars focus on the different areas that you see here. We have some strategies that are for the individual, some that are for the families and communities, and some that are related to the neighborhood. And we're working through our policies and systems change work. And so we are implementing the 4 Pillars project into 5 schools across governances in Detroit. And it was really critical that we figure out a model that we go deep, because we went wide for a really long time and learned that we needed to go deep. And so that's how the 4 Pillars project came to be. And the pillars are communication, wraparound services. What's that?
Go to the next slide. If you
go to the next slide. Oh, am I next slide? Here we go. So communication, research, technical assistance, and wraparound. And so I will kick it back to Larry to talk about this, about how the village and the really the need for the village to engage in this issue. So
I want to again come back to this idea of eye level and language. When I was in my 20s, my teens, if you had called a person of African descent Black, it would have been an invitation to a fight. It was considered an insult. But as a result of the Black Power movement, the successor to the Civil Rights movement, there was a change in eye level and language, so that the idea of being a Black person or an African American, not only did it become acceptable in the Black community, elevated into another level of the Bronfenbrenner's model, ecological model, people who were in positions of policy were compelled to change their behavior. So now when you do a forum and they ask you what your racial makeup is, nobody is going to find Negro on that forum, because it has been banished as a result of changing the eye level and the perspective on the continent of Africa and its descendants. We want to change the way we talk so that the community can engage with what we're doing, because we speak language the way the community speaks. So our language is research, communications, wraparound, and technical assistance. Here is how the community said it, because I talked to them about it, and this is what they said to me. You want to know better, research. You want to share better, communications. You want to help better, wraparound. And you want to do better, technical assistance. Now, those are all, in fact, if you think about it, the outcomes that each one of these 4 pillars seeks to effect at the individual and school level. And this is really the biggest takeaway as I conclude. More than one thing can be true at the same time. So it can be true that there are individual behaviors which must change, while it is also true that there are school building policies that need to be changed, while it is also true that there are school system regulations and policies that need to be changed. And it's also true that cultural norms, which characterize poor children as being less able or less competent, or that children are not able to make decisions themselves. All of those can be true at the same time. And we who seek to change things like chronic absence have to recognize that work has to be done in all of that. Now, Brofenbrenner is a mouthful, but everybody knows what the village is. And all Brofenbrenner was talking about was the village. And this is our way of characterizing that village, changing your eye level and speaking new words that convey to the community with which we work what this means. I spent 23 years as a pastor in Brightmoor. And one of the things that my community taught me as I was in the pulpit was that if I wanted to talk about eschatology, I should leave and go downtown to the Ecumenical Theological Seminary. But if I wanted to talk about end times and the fear of death and what does it mean for things to come to a conclusion, to be over, then I should stay in the pulpit. Eschatology is just all about the end times, and we want to put an end to chronic absence. Thank you.
Rev, can I pop in real quickly?
Sure.
Thank you. So really appreciate that framing. And I want to give a really concrete example. So my son is a third grader. I still think that's crazy that he's already in third grade, but he's a third grader in a Detroit public school. It's a public charter. And he's had some excessive absences due to some disabilities. And, you know, the school and I are very close communication about his disabilities. Nonetheless, I get the letter. And the letter comes and it's very formal. I remember sharing it with Rev and Christina and Christina and Emma, and we were horrified. And basically, it's like per Michigan law, this, you know, being reported to the state, legal action. And I read this and I'm like, oh my God, this is the letter they're sending to families.
Yes.
The word truant was in it, right? So I responded and I said, hi, thanks so much for contacting me. You know, his teacher's aware it's related to his disabilities. But did I miss a call from someone? Did I miss a call to check on us? Oh no, we have to send this letter out per the state, right? And I'm like, well, does the state mandate that you send this letter out? Because this is a horrible letter. No, that's just the letter. So I think that's an example of, instead of a district saying, wow, this little human has been absent, let's check in on them. What are the barriers, right? We know transportation is a significant barrier in Detroit. It's sending these very legalistic letters. And we also know that those are very frightening and threatening to families, particularly families with limited resources. So I just want to look at that as a very concrete example of when we change this whole paradigm, those kinds of letters aren't the first thing that go out to families, right?
No.
It's a much more community oriented wraparound supports, like how can we help you, right? Even things like access to healthcare and dental care, compound absences. So when I saw that letter, I thought this is why we're doing this work, because we're trying to shift this paradigm. So those kinds of letters don't go out and alienate families further.
Yes.
Mhm.
It's, I really want to emphasize this for us who are practitioners. Listening to the people that we serve. And by that, I include children. And the words that they use to describe their life. There's actually a very formal word for this called epistemic justice. meaning that we allow people to convey what they know in the language with which they are familiar, and we get into line and into rhythm with their communication instead of trying to force them to get in line with ours. This will shift your eye level, because when you see the world from their imperatives and circumstances, it will, I guarantee you, because you care, otherwise you wouldn't be on this call, it will change the way you work and the outcomes you get.
Leah, thank you so much for being transparent and for sharing that example. And Christine and Rev, I love what you're saying about raising our eye level. That is so powerful, and the way that you're characterizing your village. So thank you so much for sharing that. There are some great takeaways and some things that I'm actually going to carry with me through this year about raising my own eye level. Emma is joining us. And Emma is also not only a part of Attendance Works, but Every School Day Counts Detroit is also woven into your work. And Emma co-chairs or co-leads one of our communities of practice, where we have 14 partner organizations working to address absenteeism. And Emma, I would love to have you share with us about how Every School Day Counts and Attendance Works structured, how they are structured, and how they support the work that you do here in Detroit. Can you maybe share that first? And then I've got some other questions for you that I'd love to ask.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been really amazing to hear Christine and Rev just tell the story again of the impact and of the work that has been done so diligently to support better attendance and decrease chronic absence throughout the city of Detroit. So to what Elise said, I am part of Every School Day Counts Detroit, and I'm really proud to be part of that team and influence the work in that way. Also senior fellow with Attendance Works, and in this dual role, I'm able to support not only our expanded learning providers within the summer and out of school time community of practice, but a variety of schools such as charter and Detroit public schools. And so as we think about what Rev and Christine have shared and what Leah has shared about the framing of the work and the problem, we know, you can go to the next slide, that in 2021, we had at least 10 million students who were chronically absent, right? And so we estimate that after the COVID pandemic, that number has doubled, and that is very concerning for the whole nation. And so the way that we define chronic absence is missing 10% of school time for any reason, excused, unexcused, and suspensions. And that can translate into students having difficulty learning by third grade, learning to read by third grade, achieving in middle school, and graduating from high school. So prior to the pandemic, we helped Detroit Public Schools calculate their chronic absence for the first time, and affected about 56% of their students. We also helped raise awareness that the key to improving attendance is taking a problem-solving approach, not a punitive one. We also helped catalyze the creation of community of practice on peer learning networks where school teams work together to review their data on attendance, to use the data to take a tiered approach and engage in prevention and early intervention. I have especially been involved in creating these communities of practice for principals in both charter schools and DPSCD schools. And when we first began the work, there was measurable impact, and we saw some decrease in chronic absence. Unfortunately, chronic absence rose dramatically during the pandemic. Even though we believe that schools have adopted our strategies, they found them successful to stay connected, and especially as they relate to family engagement. Next slide, please. we'll skip this one. We'll go to the community of practice. Thank you. So you might ask, how does this relate to the community of practice that we're doing for summer and out of school time? This community of practice I would define as a context where we help expanded learning providers, our professional organizations of a variety of sizes and capacity and a variety of programs to do what they do even better. And so one way that we use the community of practice is to introduce key concepts and then create opportunities for participants to discuss how they can, how these key concepts can be adapted and tailored to their own realities. And then they share that with each other. One size fits all does not work, and this allows for the tailoring and local ownership. So we wanted to share with you just a bit about how we designed the community of practice. And Leah at the beginning mentioned that we are already in year 2, and we're really excited to be part of such a solid group. We work with 14 organizations that are community-based organizations here in Detroit, across the city, that serve a variety of student ages and in a variety of settings, and also a variety of programs. Year 1, we offered 4 sessions, and we thought, how do we want to design year 2 in an even better way? So year 2, we started with 3 sessions, and we increased the opportunity for one-on-one interaction through check-ins and coaching. And so between the sessions, we have not only the community of practice, which is testing out a strategy or a tool that we've introduced and the organization adopted, but also that one-on-one with either the lead of the organization or the team that actually pays attention, tracks, analyzes their data, selects strategies, and really promotes, connects with the family, right? Family engagement is critical, and really promotes the implementation practice to make a difference. And so this is what you see here on the screen is year 1. We've started with the foundations of attendance. We built on those foundations and introduced engagement. Then we focused on data that informed the work, and we spent the summer looking at how do we not only pilot tracking tools, and we've introduced one that Wayne State has developed for us, but also how do we actually track attendance? How do we analyze attendance? And so our organizations have been diligent to look at that and analyze their data throughout the summer, and we'll continue that in year 2. Next slide, please. Year 2 is a continuation, and so we called it session 4 or 5 for that reason, and 6 and 7. And so year 2 kicked off with really deepening the work and providing additional support to our partners. And one of the things that came up in our conversation was connection with schools and school staff, because we know that's mostly where we serve students or we pull students from. And so we'll talk about that, and then how to sustain the work, not only in the spring, but also throughout the summer. And so you'll see that in the design of the community of practice, a lot of the focus has been on that individualized support. And so I think that one of the best things about the way that we've designed the community of practice has been to allow for more time between sessions to have those individual calls and check-ins and thought partnership around how to address better attendance. All right, you'll see that part of our design has been to have a framework where we always allow and encourage sharing sharing of how report outs, how it's been, how the testing out of the strategy has gone. We're introducing a new topic. We have plenty of time and engaging time to do breakouts and large group discussions. And then we ensure that there is a piece of practice that we can test out between sessions. So I wanted to make sure that you noticed that part of the design of the COP. All right, next slide, please. Rev and Christine talked about a mind shift, and they talked about moving the eye level. And we always think about the mind shift of, even as we think about truancy to chronic absence, and how we take that problem solving approach, not that punitive approach. Within the context of the community of practice, we introduced this idea of a new data mindset. So as we look at the data, we collect it, we track it, we analyze it. We wanted to encourage our providers to expand their focus from attendance as compliance and funding to attendance as improved program outcomes. So in the past, a lot of us focused on attendance for the purpose of compliance and securing funding. That's not a bad thing. It's a great thing. We now want to think differently about attendance, since we know that attendance leads to improved outcomes. And attendance data, in this case, becomes the continuous improvement tool. We also want to notice when absences are occurring, because if that's happening a lot for a particular student or a group of students, it's an indication that we need to find out why students are missing, and we need to take action to increase engagement both with the student and their family. Next slide, please. As we think about attendance, and as we look at attendance, and particularly attendance data within the programs of our expanded learning providers, we always think about data by child. So we know that data by child helps clarify dosage, the need for support, and clarifies patterns or trends that are obvious from that data. So for dosage, we think about how consistently does each student attend, meaning what is that number or percentage or the dosage of the program that each student is receiving for them to have measurable impact, right? How much of your attendance is actually supporting learning? Need for support refers to the families and the students who may need more support to understand the value of consistent attendance, or to address barriers to achieve positive outcomes for the program. And then again, as we consistently look at data and not just qualitative, not just quantitative, but also quantitative data. What are those patterns and trends of absences that can help you develop a plan for improving attendance? So these are some top of mind aspects of why it's important to look at data, attendance data by child in the expanded learning context. Next slide, please. All right. We always, we also think about push and pull factors. And one of the questions that we've asked recently in the session was, how do we know what motivates students and what motivates attendance? And what are those factors that pull students in, and what pushes a student out? And so one of the activities that we want to just give you a sample, an idea of what we've done in the session and what we've learned in it, has been a Jamboard activity. And if we can go to that page, that would be great. We've asked the question again, what motivates attendance and what pushes attendance away? And so we want to share with you some of the answers from our COP participants. And this is enlightening, and we have been really grateful to hear them and get their feedback. So some of the things that we've learned about push factors have been anywhere from missing for another program or a club or activity to content and maybe perhaps not being relatable to them, excuse me, or students are tired, it's the end of the day, they have other commitments. So those are some of the push factors. Some of the pull factors that attract students and families to the summer not a school time programming include fun activities. We know that fun and engagement always works. If other friends are coming or attending that program, they're most likely to go. Genuine interest in the topic, the theme or the activity, and always, at least for the parents, a safe space and an engaging space. That one that's academically engaging, especially for those tutoring programs. Thank you for sharing the slide, this or this image. This is great feedback. Thank you. We'll go back to our slides. So as we think about one back, well, I'll let Andrea take the Center for Success in just a few minutes. As we think about attendance in our summer not a school time community of practice, we pay attention to the feedback from participants. So I wanted to give you an example because this was brought up by Christina and Rev. We know that transportation is a big barrier to attendance in Detroit. We've identified the transportation as the group's highest priority. So we purposefully started the following session with brainstorming around attendance and around transportation and what can providers do, given that the large-scale solution to transportation deals with public administration and bureaucracies. So looking at what changes program providers might make, so those things that are under control and influence, to address this issue in concert with families. Another piece of feedback included a focus on families and building relationships. Family engagement has been always something that was important and is still top of mind for our community of practice members. Summer not a school time community of practice also includes an attendance tracking process and a tool. So we know that schools are more consistently outfitted with data tools and with the team that's responsible for collecting and analyzing data, whereas in our community of practice or in the summer not a school times context or spaces, there's a wide range of ways to gather data. So one of the important things has been for us to provide a method of gathering and analyzing data, a consistent process, even if the intake process varies from program to program. So in our support, Wayne State University has developed a summer not a school time attendance tracking tool. And we're really happy to say that some of our organizations are testing that out, and we are learning a lot in the middle of this test out, how that tool is working, knowing that most of our organizations are using tools that they have already designed that by themselves or with others or purchased and personalized to their own needs to track attendance and analyze it. And then I would say, just before I share one more thing, I would say that again, the biggest success of our community of practice has been the combination of session presentations that are highly interactive and stimulate new ideas, with the follow-up of individualized coaching and check-ins. I believe it's this combination that's making a big difference. And before we invite Elise to invite Andrea, who's one of our amazing partners and also a participant in the community of practice, I wanted to share just a quick bright spot around how we've been able to make a difference through the community of practice. One of the program providers, a community organization that offers tutoring to high school students, has been a bright spot for, I would say, at least two reasons. They've seen good and great attendance in their after-school program due to the fact that their tutors are physically walking the students from school to the after-school center. In this case, location proximity is to their advantage. And so they've been smart to use that to their advantage and have a great attendance. And then they're also the team that have posed some really great questions within the community of practice space for us to answer collectively. I'll give you just 2 examples. What type of trainings, including attendance training, tracking and analysis, are other organizations providing to their tutors, interns, and after-school staff? And then are there content pieces that we can take and use on a larger scale? Is there anything that's replicable and sustainable? So they're always thinking about bigger pictures. And then the second question I want to share with you is what has been successful for other organizations in their partnership with schools, both in terms of their data agreements and relationship with key stakeholders at the school sites. So with this in mind, I wanted to say I'm grateful again for this opportunity to share some of the lessons learned and just our experience in the community of practice. And now I'll turn it over to Elise to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Emma. And I think is it you that calls that the walking school bus, where the mentors are walking the students from the school? I love that.
One strategy. Yes, that's one strategy.
Love that. And I do have a question for you. It's kind of a 2-parter. Can you share a little bit about how supporting after school differs from supporting school day attendance? And with the push-pull factors, do you find that maybe some of those apply only to after school, or some of them apply only to the school day, or do they mostly apply to both school day and after school?
These are great questions. I would say that attendance differs from school to after school based on, I would say, relationship. Ideally, we should have great relationships with the key leaders at the schools and have MOUs, data agreements, where you're able to collaborate with the school staff, primarily the principal and their leadership team, to be able to look at the attendance, understand the patterns, chime into what existing parent-teacher conferences are, any meetings between school staff and parents, so that what's already built into the school is also to your advantage as a provider that wraps around the school. And Christine talked about wraparound supports. That's one way to wrap around the schools, to understand what are those needs that the parents have or those families have that would impact their attendance in the after school programs, or that would support what's going really well at the schools in terms of process or schedule, or relationship, right? Many times it's a relationship that that would actually coordinate or help support after school programs. And I just want to be clear, when we talk about summer and out of school time, we think about before, during, and after school, right? We cover all programs. So I would say the difference would be in both. Well, there's a lot of content that has been developed for K-12 settings, and we know that both nationally and locally. And in terms of after school support of attendance and frameworks, this is such a unique project, and we're learning a lot, and we're doing we're paying attention to what we hear from our COP members. We're paying attention to our communities, to the schools, to all of our stakeholders. And again, this is a new area we're exploring, and I would say stay tuned because there will be a lot more lessons learned, maybe in year 2, after year 2 or 3, depending again on commitments and funding and things like that. And then remind me, Elise, about the question about pull and pull factors, push and pull.
Yes, I was just curious if those factors, if you found that the ones that were on the Jamboard, do most of those apply across the board after school as well as during the school day, or are you finding that some of those really are just applying to one or the other?
I would say they apply. So the answers came directly from our after school members, the members of the COP. And I would say that they apply to both, especially as we think about engagement. Many answers were referring to if my friend comes, or if I have a person that I like, a teacher that I like, an advisor that I like, I'm most likely to attend. In many cases, those are very similar in both contexts. And so I would pay attention to the bigger picture of our strategy is engagement and relationship building. And if that is solid and in place, I would say a lot of things will fall into place because you'll have processes that make sense. You'll have fun and engaging activities that should be in school and after school. I would say both.
Thank you. Thank you so much for piloting this with 313 Reads. And I know Leah I think she's got something that she wants to add, and then Christine, you have something that you want to add as well.
Thanks, Elise. Thanks, Emma. Yeah, so one of the things that I wanted to ping is just to amplify what Emma said about this is new. So even in our evaluation of this, working with Detroit Peer to do the evaluation, the tricky part was drawing on the existing research at evidence base for what works in summer and out of school time programs supporting attendance, and specifically around early childhood. And Emma and her colleagues at Attendance Works, like they built new curricula for this COP, right? And Wayne State Detroit Peer is building a new body of research around this kind of attendance. And I dropped a link to a Detroit Peer report, which was 3rd grade reading and attendance in Detroit. And it really was a rallying call for us when we saw that strong relationship. But also, we really wanted to think about how do we make this community of practice accessible to our partners. So it's things like having stipends available for folks. That's important. So when we funded it, we wanted to make sure that we were addressing barriers to their capacity, et cetera. And so, just amplifying again, like this is really groundbreaking, and we are learning so much about it. We previously mobilized our common assessment. We asked for those pre and post assessment back and the attendance data back. And it was always really problematic to get the attendance data back, right? But instead of just saying like, oh, we're not getting attendance data from everyone, to say, so like, what are the barriers? And part of it was not having tools that worked well, moving beyond paper and pencil, or having tools that weren't clunky. And so developing and piloting some new tools with Wayne State. And we still haven't landed on quite the answer for the right tool. Would love other, suggestions that you have as well, because I always think about some programming someone was doing that I was there visiting and observing, and it was time for kids to be picked up. Then one of the kids vomited, and they're trying to get kids around vomit and parents in, and there's so much happening in the moment in programming, and stopping to do those attendance pieces can be tricky. But without having really clear understanding of which students were present for how many sessions, for how much of those sessions, what was the dosage they actually received, it's really hard then to do an evaluation where we can make a correlation between the intervention and the dosage of the intervention without also having those attendance data. So if we really want to understand the impact, we have to have both. And really grateful for Emma and her Attendance Works colleagues for building out this new curriculum for us.
Thank you. And I think, Christine, you wanted to hop in as well.
So we were actually part of, you and I, as part of this community, community of practice. And Andrea, I know, is coming up next, and she might talk a little bit about this. I think one of the major differences between out-of-school time providers and school is we're under far less pressure around attendance. So when Leah talked about the letter that she got as a parent, some of those letters are driven by teachers being accountable for students being at school as it relates to their evaluation and pay. So as we talk about raising our eye level, part of it is also seeing the complexity of attendance and who is being impacted, whether very directly or indirectly. And I think out-of-school time providers have less pressure as it relates to attendance. But when we first started this work, I will never forget some out-of-school providers saying to us, I want to be a part of this work because I can't do immersive out-of-school time programming because attendance is so irregular. So we experience sort of the same struggles because there are things that it just takes time being somewhere for some amount of time on a regular basis to learn and practice and grow. So I think that's a similarity between schools and out-of-school time providers, except for I think we have far less pressure as it relates to our outcomes. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Thank you. And Rev, I think you have something that you'd like to add, and then we're going to go ahead and move on to Andrea.
Very quickly, this is an example of perhaps shifting our eye level because the demands of time on the providers is so intense. Perhaps what our value add is to send somebody whose sole job is to take the attendance and to keep the records and relieve all the other staff of that function. So as we come to help, maybe the help is not our deep theoretical application of practices, but just somebody to do the clerk work.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a really rich conversation. I want to move forward here with our next speaker, with Andrea, who not only co-chairs our summer and out-of-school timetable, but she is also the executive director of Center for Success Network. So she's here not only as a coalition member, but can also speak about her experience as a provider. So Andrea, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and thank you so much. I just want to double down on everything that just came up in that last kind of segment. And this is where the work of coalition building is so important, because we all have access to individuals in different ways. We're part of different systems and understanding families in different pockets of our community, that when we come together and we realize that we're all talking about the same thing, it's so powerful. I'm going to start by talking a lot about some of the successes and a few of the challenges that we've had. There's so much to celebrate with our students, with our families, with our team at the Center for Success, as well as with our community. They really just are amazing. I also want to level set that I'm a former classroom educator. So I spent 10 years inside a classroom with the challenges of attendance there, and have that perspective while we're implementing out of school time programming now. I never would have thought as a classroom teacher to reach out so deeply to community and understand how partners are engaging, community centers and enrichment programs are engaging our students. And I think there's real value in teachers connecting and administrators and schools connecting with our community partners, because there is a different level of relationship. And as many of the other folks said, that there's a different relationship that we have. Students often have had failures at school or have had arguments with their classmates, or maybe don't have a teacher that they're really connected with. And out of school is really, really a different dynamic. Out of school can also stay really nimble and flexible. So if there are challenges coming up in our community that we understand, we can change things. We don't have big systems and kind of bureaucracies telling us we have to go with the same system. So I would say the biggest success that we have is building relationships across the board. So if you move to the next slide, that shows our community partners. Center for Success offers programming at 2 hubs that we own and operate, but we also exist in partnership with 12 other locations that we plug in, and we do the literacy work at their existing youth development organizations. In that initial conversation before we partner, there's clear connecting and understanding of what our mutual goals are, what already systems are in place, how students are enrolled, and what other programs exist, and how we can fit into that really seamlessly. And so, like, before we even start, that conversation is there. We also have really incredible advocates at those community organizations. For example, there's a woman named Blue that works at the Cody Rouge site for Brilliant Detroit. She's a mom who has students in our program. She also manages that site and is a fierce community advocate, both for Brilliant Detroit and in the school system. And so having these layers of relationships there is just incredible. That draws us into understanding where families are at and how they're engaging with that program. We also can draw, because we're in partnership with all of these amazing organizations, we can pull best practices that we're seeing at each of these different sites and say, hey, this is really working great at Downtown Boxing Gym. Can we apply that here somehow? Or Urban Neighborhood Initiatives is brilliant at this. Can we try that at our hub site? So that's the first step in relationships, is with our community partners. And then we build relationships with families upon enrollment. When they first reach out to our organization, we're making sure that we're saying, you know, what is your expectation? What drew you to our program? Let us tell you about our program and how critical attendance is. When we're looking at literacy gains, we know that attending regularly and connecting frequently is going to give the best output and outcome for our students, and really helping our families understand that. So from enrollment, from the onset, we're talking together about that. And then much like Emma spoke about the coaching and the one-to-one connecting that attendance work and that the community of practice is doing with program providers, the Center for Success is doing with students and mentors. So our program is mentor driven. Every student works with a mentor one-on-one for their own literacy goals. So the students know that they have a champion for them, someone they're really connected with, that's excited to see them that evening at program. And so that's really driving excitement and engagement. This list shows our enrichment partners. Almost all of these enrichment partners were student driven and student decided. So the enrichment work that we do beyond the literacy work, the students tell us that they want to try swimming, or they want to do more arts, or they want to get connected with softball or golf. And we find those providers that are doing that and bring them into our programming. So with students being able to guide what the program looks like, they're excited to come and be there because they've chosen those enrichment pieces and they want to participate in them. We also, a lot of our the friends of our students are coming into our program because they're asking for their friends to come and be involved. They're excited and enjoying our programming, so they're telling their friends to come. Or a friend is already enrolled and a friend isn't there that night at programming, and our students are helping to reach out and say, where were you? We missed you. I want to see you there next time. So that student piece is really, really important. Our enrollment happens through word of mouth. We're very connected with school partners, but a lot of times our families are telling other families to come and enroll. So there is that camaraderie and excitement of students and families that know each other. If you go to the next slide, you can also see a little bit about the feedback that we're getting from our families and our mentors, that they really are seeing an improvement in the skills that their students are learning, as well as their confidence levels, their engagement in school, their outlook on reading. And we survey families often. We also, in an equitable manner, we stipend or we give incentives for those surveys so that our families time and understanding of what's going on is valued, and we're giving that, we're making sure they know that's valued. And then we're very quick to implement change in the program if those numbers fall. we want to make sure we're changing the program in response to the survey. So we're not just getting feedback to get feedback. We want to know what we can do to improve the program. We also celebrate often. So we celebrate when students arrive. We have someone there waiting for them, saying hello by name, saying that we're excited to see them, asking about their day. We celebrate with different types of events. So if you go to the next slide, you can see some of the events that we have so that students, you know, often we're celebrating, we're enjoying the time that we're spending together. We also relay growth information to families and talk to them about how many sessions they've been at and the growth that we've seen. And we know that if they continue to engage, that they'll be there, that growth will continue to move positively. I talked a little about those clear expectations. We also want to make sure that we have frequent connections. So the attendance tool that we've been able to create with the community of practice helps us to set reminders, set check-ins, make sure we're constantly on track and connecting with families, not just if there's an issue, but also to celebrate and say, hey, we've seen you all month this month. It's been so great. Thanks for being there. We recognize that. And then that tool also gives us a plan of action. We call them standard operating procedures. We have some military background folks on our team, but that plan of action is if we see X number of absences, then we're going to first reach out and have a conversation. What's going on? What can we help with? How can we engage with you and support you? If there continues to be absences, then we can develop a plan with the family to really, how can we support? We also do provide transportation from school. So about 7 years ago, we decided we needed our own bus and we bought 2 buses for our school sites, and we transport directly from school. Students know they have to be at school and parents know they have to be at school to get that transportation. So that helps a little bit in this school to out of school time attendance. And then that transportation allows families to not have to have a break. I'm a working mom. I couldn't go to school and get my kids and take them to another program right now. So being able to have that seamless transition to after school. It also gives a chance, and I can speak personally, I was the bus driver for a while, to meet with the team of incredible teachers, advisors, paraprofessionals that are at the school building. So when I was picking students up, I knew the secretary, the janitor, the after school SAC teachers, and I could check in with them and ask, how did the day go? Is there anything I need to know as students come over to us? So it's a nice seamless transition to our program, and we know each other really well. That transportation comes up in every conversation I've had across Detroit when it comes to out of school time providers. So I'm kind of moving into some challenges. The other piece that's been challenging for us, as Leah mentioned, Detroit Public School District is really, really large, but we have significant numbers of public charters or private schools or other options for our families. And so as an out of school time provider, we are serving kids from across all of those different schools. Sometimes the calendars do not match up. Sometimes the breaks do not match up, or the dismissal times. And that can be a challenge. So really understanding with schools, is your calendar set in stone? Can we be on your outreach list if there's going to be a snow day or a day off? And who our connection point is at the school is really important. We also, when we serve across multiple districts, we have to have multiple people to connect with at schools. So family dynamics can also be a challenge. So families' work schedules, illnesses that are coming in, of course, with the pandemic, but even seasonal, when we see illnesses pop up, siblings that are in different schools or in different programs may be a challenge if a family needs to pick up from several places. So understanding other programs and connecting with other programs that siblings are in helps us get a better full picture of what families' challenges are. Housing can be really hard if families are transitional and they may be moving from one housing situation to the next, and our site may not be as convenient anymore. We can move a student into a virtual program as they get readjusted and then welcome them back when their family is settled. Those are some ways that we've been able to overcome that type of challenge. We also are in a building in Detroit called the Durfee Innovation Society. There's over 40 nonprofits within that building. At least 10 of them are youth serving nonprofits. And so we can talk with them. There's a youth collective in the building. We can talk about if siblings are within those programs, if their start or end time is different than ours, those kind of things. And then, you know, access is a big issue for challenges. So whether it be access, if the home environment is not quiet, if there's not access to internet and things like that, or adult supervision, then our virtual program might be harder, or where are pockets in the city where there's not access to get to our programs.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And I love that you are listening to the families, that they're being heard through these surveys, and that you're putting together attendance plans for children that might have some challenges in those areas, and that you're celebrating the children. I love that. And Leah, I'd love to invite you to come back and to just really help put just a big bow on everything that we've heard today, if you would, and just tie it all together for us.
Yeah, I'm happy to put a bow on it. Yeah, thank you to everyone, first of all. So really what I hope folks got a sense of today was that we're really working deeply, across organizations, across the coalition, to see where we can have aligned, coordinated efforts for impact, right? And so we see the impact of attendance on literacy. So how can we learn and grow together? And we are still learning in this. And one thing I really want to center is that we don't have all the answers, but we know we're better together. And what we're learning is already informing the next community of practice that we're building. And we're grateful for that. And we would really welcome, if you're implementing communities of practice in your CGLRs, we'd love to connect with you. You know, what's working? What have you learned that hasn't worked well for you? So please reach out to us. We'd love to learn. We'd love to learn from you. And for us, a big part of this work, Alan raised a question in the chat about impact. And so for us, we are really excited as well to be thinking more about data alignment so that we can look at attendance and literacy intervention and how that rolls up into school-based literacy impact, right? And so that's where, for us, it's also meant some big shifts in our data sharing agreements. A couple of years ago, we didn't have those kinds of data sharing agreements. And now, looking at how we can look at our benchmark assessments, look at our attendance data, and then compare those to the assessments in the schools and to the state level assessments and see, what's the relationship between these? What correlations do we see in terms of having more or less growth in school-based literacy? Do we see in students who have been part of our program partners literacy interventions? That's really big work, really big data work. And it's made much more complex by the fact, as I mentioned, that we don't have just one district, we have so many school districts. So that's ongoing work for us as well, and excited to learn from you. So please reach out. We'd love to have more conversations. I know after I've attended CGLRs, Crucible of Practice and other kinds of webinars, I've always followed up with folks, and we've been really grateful for those one-on-one conversations and thought partnering. So thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your expertise. And we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leah. And thank you so much, Malai, for having us. And I'll just turn the floor back over to you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. This team always astounds me. So I'm sitting here a little bit speechless. I'm not quite sure what to say yet, other than I just appreciate everybody's wisdom today. There's so much rich information that will be shared in the follow-up document. So please be sure to watch your emails, everybody, for that information. And we will follow up with everyone through that. Sierra, we do have one last slide, which is to give a heads up about the sessions that are coming up. With a rebroadcast today, and then we do have some live sessions also the rest of this month. So Sarah Torian, my colleague, has placed in the chat registration link to get in on those. And so I just want to wish everybody a happy new year. Thank you for spending your morning, afternoon time, or lunchtime with us this afternoon and learning about all of the amazing work happening with 313 Reads. I feel like this conversation could probably go on even longer. There's just so much that was shared. So I'm so grateful. Thank you, everybody. Wish you the best of the rest of this day. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.